Reppin' Philly ain't a choice. It's a way of life. PhillyGoat.com is your one-stop shop for Philly pride. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off. Look fresh, stay Philly, Philly Goat. Go Birds. What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for June 18th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the podcast. Happy Humpday to everyone out there. We've made it this far. We're close, but we got a lot to talk about with the Phillies. And the big story was Nick Castellanos benched, missing his first game since September 30th, 2023, ending the consecutive game streak, all because he said something inappropriate to Rob Thomson. And not sure what he said. I've been trying to figure it out. Obviously, I mean, he admitted that he was not happy about being pulled out of the game. But in order to, I feel as though Rob Thomson has a long leash. So in order to get kicked out for saying something inappropriate, I wonder if he said something specifically about Rojas, something specifically about Thomson. I keep going back to maybe he mentioned or said something about Canadians. I don't know, but I'm dying to figure out what he said, because I feel for Rob Thomson to bench somebody in a situation where every game matters and things like that. But I mean, good for Topper though. I mean, finally we've been asking him to sort of show his authority and basically do this. I wish it would have happened a couple years ago with some of the guys, Trey, Bryce, who were chasing pitches, but good for him. I mean, Castellanos didn't seem like he was shocked. He said it was the manager's decision. I made a comment. He said it was over the line, inappropriate, whatever. So we'll see. But, of course, there was a play that Max Kepler fumbled that led to a couple runs for the Marlins that maybe Castellanos would have caught. You never know. But Phils lose their winning streak, losing to the Marlins 6-3. They hit the ball well, but I mean, every time they hit the ball hard, it was right toward a Marlin. A 5 out of 6 streak is not bad. Luzardo did not have his best stuff. Maybe he was a little too hyped up for the being back against his other team or his former team. But I mean, win the next two. You take 3 out of 4 from the Marlins, who did come in relatively hot to this series. Looking forward to that series this weekend against the Mutts. This is, again, baseball. And I know I've talked about this before. We like eagle-fy every Phillies game where it's like, oh my goodness, the sky is falling with every loss. You're going to lose games. And to win 5 in a row, then lose, if they win another 5 in a row, we'll be fine. But it's on to the next one tonight. Ranger Suarez takes the mound for the Phils. And I wanted to mention this. I've seen a lot of people talking on social media and different sports talk radio stations and things like that about Mick Abel. And now all of a sudden he's turned the corner into, oh my gosh, we can't trade Mick Abel. And relax, take a deep breath, because we said as soon as he came up, he was either going to be auditioning for a spot in the Phillies starting rotation or would be auditioning to become trade bait. And I think with the way this team is, you got to go for it. Strike while the iron's hot. And if you can get somebody back for Mick Abel, I say do it. And I think I heard somebody make this point on 94 the other day or yesterday. And the truth of the matter is, if you're a good drafter or you feel like you have a good system in place, you're going to be able to replace those pieces that you trade away. It's part of why you have a farm system, obviously to look toward the future, but to use those assets to make your current team better. So if you really feel like you've solved it and you have good things in place, it shouldn't be that hard to replace some of these guys. So we'll see what happens, but I wanted to mention those two things. And of course, since this is this day in Philly sports history, give you a little bit of a historical aspect on Castellanos' games played streak. He was only about halfway there. He had 260-something. The club record is Granny Hamner with 473 consecutive starts or games played, I guess, for the Phillies. All right, let's get into some quick housekeeping. Be sure to follow me on social media, Jimbo_Mont on Twitter and TikTok. On Instagram, @PhillyJimbo. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont, and continue to spread the word. I always say, but if you're enjoying this, likely someone in your network will as well. And if you are a new listener, welcome. Glad to have you. If you want to see highlights, newspaper clips, photos of what we're talking about that day, all of my social media has that, as well as my Facebook and LinkedIn. And of course, the Discord channel is live. It is the first link in the description. Come over, create a Discord account, and let's talk some Philly sports. I mentioned this yesterday. I thank you for your patience as I kind of roll through and sort of tweak and make some minor adjustments and improvements to the podcast. As I mentioned yesterday, if we were in a retail store, it would say, please pardon our dust as we remodel. So thank you for your patience. I'm excited to kick off our new segment for Wednesdays today in a minute. But as I always do, I like to make sure I'm giving you the facts. And yesterday we talked about Mike Schmidt making his professional debut in an exhibition game between the Phillies and the Reading Phillies. And I said he went to Eugene. And I did not know what the Eugene mascot was. They're the Eugene Emeralds. They play in the Pacific Coast League out in Eugene, Oregon, and they were associated with the Phillies as one of their primary teams, eventually becoming the AAA team from 1964 through 1973. So Mike Schmidt played there near the very end of the affiliation between the Phillies and the Eugene Emeralds. And I want to also mention, too, I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and it's not like I'm going to all of a sudden start doing it, but WIP is doing their top 11, all the hosts and everybody's doing their lists and things like that. And people are like, oh, listen, it's tough in the summertime, I know, to get quality content. So the fact that you're talking about the list and they're starting debate and argument, it's exactly what they want. So if you're not happy with it, just keep your mouth shut. I mean, that's all I can say. But it's fun. It's something to do in the summertime. I don't have an issue with it at all. Not that I'm all of a sudden going to start doing top 10 lists. That's just not really my style. All right, so the new segment for Wednesdays, we're going to do What If Wednesdays. And that's going to be brought to you by Lotwin. Get your 3D hype chains from Lotwin. These things are custom made. They're great for bachelor parties, youth sports, fantasy football, punishments, rewards, things like that. And they're awesome. So go to Lotwin.com, get your 3D custom hype chain. They'll work with you to get what you want. And use the promo code TCCPOD for 10% off your orders. But What If Wednesday will be brought to you by Lotwin. And What If Wednesdays, we're going to go back to the roots. And I've mentioned this before, but all of this started because I was writing a book about what ifs in Philly sports history. I guess you could still say, excuse me, I'm still in the process of writing it. But looking at major what ifs in Philly sports history. Now, I'm not going to go into the depth that I was going in the book. I'm probably not even going to cover all of them because it eventually turned into an Eagles book. But part of this podcast was to kind of get through the writer's block, and it's kind of taken off from there. But June 17th, yesterday, was the anniversary of the Sixers trading Charles Barkley to the Phoenix Suns. And it kind of always wondered what if they kept him. Because, he was not happy. And wasn't necessarily that he was unhappy with the team or this. Well, he was unhappy with the team. But it wasn't like he was unhappy with the fans or the city or anything like that. He was just unhappy with the moves they were making and not his perception that they weren't trying to build a winner. It started with trading Moses Malone, which we talked about earlier in the week, and just kind of went. But could it have worked if the Sixers kept Charles Barkley? And part of the issue was they had, and this is one of my favorite words to say on this show, a cacophony of ridiculousness. a cacophony of ridiculousness when it came to their draft picks. They drafted guys like Hersey Hawkins, Kenny Payne. They traded draft picks for Rick Mahorn, Manute Bol. I mean, they drafted Clarence Witherspoon. And here's just a list of some of the players that the Sixers could have had. Reggie Lewis, Mark Jackson, Dan Marley, Rod Strickland, Cliff Robinson, the right one, Clifford Robinson, Cedric Ceballos, Rick Fox, Latrell Sprewell, or Robert Horry. So, in theory, had the Sixers hit those draft picks, they could have had a starting lineup: Rod Strickland, Latrell Sprewell, Rick Fox, Charles Barkley, and Cliff Robinson. Not bad. Not bad at all. And would they have been enough to compete with the Bulls? I don't know about that. But they certainly could have been a tough team in the NBA playoffs. And honestly, if they made better picks, they could have also, like, after having that core, could have added guys like Allen Houston, Eddie Jones, Rasheed Wallace, even Kevin Garnett. And yes, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback here when we have the ability to look back and see like 10 to 12 years straight of missed draft picks. But if you hit 1, 2, maybe even 3 of them, the whole outlook changes, and maybe Charles Barkley doesn't want to leave, and maybe it looks different. I do think that part of the issue was at the time was the Bulls were, you're coming off the Celtics, transitioned into the Pistons, and then the Bulls. Nobody was beating the Bulls. But you could have been more competitive. Maybe Barkley's numbers look better. Maybe he becomes, he's already an all-time great. He was a all 50th team and all 75th anniversary team for the NBA. But maybe it looks different. Maybe that leads to no Allen Iverson. But could it have worked? And should they have at least have tried more? And you always wonder, what if? And maybe they do. Maybe they do get lucky with a starting lineup with Rod Strickland, Latrell Sprewell, Rick Fox, Barkley, and Cliff Robinson. Maybe they do get lucky one year against the Bulls. You just never know how these things go. So what do you think on that? Would it have played out much differently if the Sixers kept Charles Barkley? And truthfully, as I was looking at some of the research, it wasn't even so much Barkley. It was just the idiocy of the front office just picking the wrong guy year after year after year. But like I said, a cacophony of ridiculousness when it comes to their draft picks. But let me know your thoughts on the Barkley trade. 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Get that. Anything else Philly sports related off of your chest. Also, come over to the Discord. This will be a good discussion. I'm going to get the thread started in the Discord channel for that. But what do you think? Would it have made a difference? I don't know. I think making any sort of effort would have helped with this situation. That leads us to yesterday's trivia question. I asked you, who is the Phillies' all-time leader for strikeouts per 9 inning as a pitcher? I should have put a qualifier on there. I think the way this was measured at baseballreference.com was a minimum of 500 innings pitched. But Vincent Velasquez, with a 9.916 strikeout per 9 inning rate, is the all-time leader in Phillies history. Not necessarily who you would have expected. We had a good conversation about him yesterday as well on the Discord. Essentially, unfulfilled expectations for Vincent Velasquez. So thank you for everyone who reached out, attempted to answer. We went through the top 10 Phillies all-time, and most of the ones on the top 10 list you would expect. Vince Velasquez at the top was not on my bingo card for yesterday. Packing up the whole crew for a week down the shore? Don't waste your first day dragging bags and beach chairs. Let Beach Caddy do the work. With bellhop service for move-ins and move-outs, plus beach cart rentals in Ocean City, Avalon, Sea Isle, Stone Harbor, and Wildwood, they've got your back from driveway to dune. Stress less, relax more. Book now at beachcaddy.app. Use the promo code Jimbo for 10% off your bellhop or cart rental services. Beach Caddy, because vacation should start when you get there. Best beach carts on the Jersey Shore. Book now at beachcaddy.app. Use the promo code Jimbo for 10% off your order, and let Beach Caddy take the stress out of your vacation. These guys are great. I'm telling you, Beach Caddy, A+ organization. Trust me when I say use these guys if you're going to the Jersey Shore. All right, June 18th. And in 1987, after going 190 and 194 in his Phillies career as manager, the Phillies decided to fire John Felske after a 29-32 start to the season, hoping that a change in manager would ignite the fire under the Phillies. They hired Philly native Lee Elia to be their manager, guided them to a 51-50 finish to end that season. But 1988 was just brutal. Lee went 60-92 before being fired with 9 games left in the season. So not a good manager experience at all. I do remember this very, very, very vividly. John Felske getting fired. It was really the first time I was old enough to know and realize that a manager was getting fired. And I remember thinking it was cool that Lee Elia was the guy, a bench coach, and Philly guy. It was like, oh, great. He wasn't that good. So on this day in 1987, Phillies move on from manager John Felske. But 2 years later, they made a couple of trades on this day in 1989 that would pay dividends for that 93 team. First, full-blown rebuilding mode. They traded Steve Bedrosian and a player to be named later for Terry Mulholland, Charlie Hayes, Dennis Cook. And we know Mulholland became one of the studs and the horses for that 93 rotation. Would go on to pitch a no-hitter for the Phillies as well. Then later in the day, they sent Juan Samuel to the Mets for Lenny Dykstra, Roger McDowell, and a player to be named later. And of course, we know Dykstra, we just talked about it last week on Fridays with AI, would have been the World Series MVP had Mitch Williams not served up that home run. So a couple of fire sale moves at the time. Steve Bedrosian was coming off 2 years removed from winning the Cy Young. Juan Samuel was a fan favorite. I hesitate to say Philly's great. You guys know how I feel about him being in the Wall of Fame. But two moves that would pay dividends for that 93 team. And then probably the biggest story that happened on this day in Philly sports history was in 2007. Two absolutely brilliant iron workers attached a William Penn statue, an American flag, and a small evergreen tree to the top of the Comcast Center, essentially ending the curse of Billy Penn. None of us knew at the time whether or not it was going to work or not. But what we saw after William Penn became the highest point in the city once again was the Phillies chasing down the Mets, winning the division, and going on to be in the postseason for the first time since '93, and then they would win the World Series the next year. So thank you to John Joyce and Dan Ginion for your forward and brilliant thinking while you're up there putting the last beams on the Comcast Center. And if you're keeping score at home, yes, they did put another William Penn statue on top of the second Comcast building, which is higher. And that happened in 2017, which later that season, the Eagles ended up winning the first Super Bowl. So if you don't believe in curses, I don't know what to tell you. As soon as William Penn goes back on top of the city, Phillies make the postseason, win the division. As soon as he goes back on top for the second Comcast Tower, Eagles go on a run and win the Super Bowl. And that's what happened this day in Philly sports history. All right, today's trivia question. Going back to Charles Barkley. Yesterday was the anniversary of the trade that sent him to the Suns. Who did the Sixers receive in that trade? That is the question. Go to the Discord channel. Hit me up on the Back to the Future voice and text line, 267-495-8531. Any of my social media, but who was involved in that Charles Barkley trade? Sixers sent Charles Barkley to Phoenix. Who do we get in return? And then finally today, our greatest individual season in Philly sports history. Yesterday, we finished up the Sixers' first round. Wilt Chamberlain dominated. The 1966-67 Wilt Chamberlain beat 1979-1980 Dr. J to move on, meaning there are 4 Wilt Chamberlain seasons left in the top 8 of the Sixers region. Not really a shocker or a surprise there, but just thought that was a little bit interesting. But today we have our final first-round matchup in the Eagles region. We got number 7, Donovan McNabb, my man, number 5 from 2004. He threw for 3,875 yards, 64% completion percentage, which was a career high, 31 touchdowns, which was a career high, only 8 interceptions, made it to the Pro Bowl, had a 104.7 quarterback rating, added 3 rushing touchdowns, and we all know led them to the Super Bowl before ultimately falling to Tom Brady and the Patriots. A lot of people will say it took Terrell Owens to get Donovan to have his finest season as a quarterback, but Donovan still had to make it happen. He's actually thrown for more yards in the 2008 season with lesser receivers. But that's the number 7 seed. Taking on the number 10 seed, Lesean McCoy from 2013. This one's going to be a battle. Lesean that year ran for 1,607 yards, which was a team record, and led the NFL. 9 rushing touchdowns, averaged an impressive 100 yards per game. Added 52 catches for 539 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 2,146 all-purpose yards for the Eagles was a team record until this past season when Saquon basically shattered that. He went to the Pro Bowl. He was an All-Pro. The Eagles came back and won the division that year, losing in the wild card. That was Chip Kelly's first year as head coach. So now it's your turn. Whose season was better? Donovan McNabb in 2004, Lesean McCoy in 2013. Get your votes in. Same deal. Any way you can. Call me on the Back to the Future voice and text line. Hit me up on social media. The Discord channel. All of that is available for you to vote. But get your vote in. Our final first round matchup of the tournament. We kick off the second round tomorrow, where the battles are going to start becoming a little bit more tougher to decide. On this day in 2007, the Ironworkers attached a small replica statue of William Penn to the top of the Comcast Center, essentially ending the Curse of Billy Penn. In 1989, the Phillies made a couple moves that would pay dividends in 93, acquiring Terry Mulholland and Lenny Dykstra in 2 separate trades. And then in 1987, Phillies move on from John Felske, hire Phillies own Lee Elia, who did not have a chance. I mean, those teams were terrible, absolutely terrible. But let me know what you're thinking. What if Wednesday? What if the Sixers could have made it work with Charles Barkley and didn't trade him? That is sponsored by Lotwin. Get your 3D custom hype chains. We'll have more on the Nick Castellanos situation, as well as the Phillies Marlins recap as they look to bounce back and take Game 3 of this series after ending their 5-game losing streak. And just as a quick little side note reminder, This Day in Philly Sports History is a part of the Clashing Conferences Sports Fan Network. Go to theclashingconferences.com, see how you can get involved and become a member and what they have to offer to you. But this has been This Day in Philly Sports History for June 18th, 2025. My name's Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a Wednesday. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.